Hi, everyone. Welcome to our triple book launch and happy Earth Day. So yay. So I'm very excited tonight to have George, David, and Michael read from their new books. And I just wanted to say a few things about Cervena Barva Press. This month we turned 17, and so far we have published about 220 books. So I'm really excited about that. And I already told you that this reading will be recorded. And if you know anyone who cannot make it tonight, they can watch it on YouTube on our Cervena Barva Press channel. So our first reader tonight is George Kalamaras, and this is his new book, Marsupial Mouth Movements. He is the former Poet Laureate of Indiana, is the author of 11 full-length books of poetry and 7 poetry chapbooks. He has received several national prizes for his poetry, and he spent several months in India in 1994 on the Indo-U.S. Advanced Research Fellowship. He is professor of English at Purdue University Fort Wayne, where he has taught since 1990. He lives with his wife, writer Mary Ann Cain, and their beagle, Bootsie, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I give you George.
I should be unmuted, right? Thank you. Everybody hear me okay? Thanks, Glo. I want to, Bootsie sometimes she scratches at the door when I teach and I have to get up and get her. So hopefully we won't have an interruption, but it's a cute interruption if we have one. I want to thank Gloria and Bill for bringing out such a beautiful book, Marsupial Mouth Movements. I'm so very grateful. I know how much work it is to bring a book out. And they were wonderful and produced just a gorgeous book. And I want to thank my fellow readers, Michael and David. This is going to be a lot of fun this evening to share our poems together. While I'm thanking people, I know John Bradley is here and Ray Gonzalez, two of my closest friends who I've known for at least 40 years, maybe even longer. And my poetry would not be the same without them. So I want to thank them for coming because we have shared so much with our writing. And I also want to thank two other really dear friends, Paul B. Roth and Lawrence R. Smith. Larry, I hope you can hear. I still am not sure if you're fully connected because they've become dear friends, but they were publishers of my poems way before we became friends. And they have both championed this series of poems called the Bone Sutras, which Marsupial Mouth Movements is part of. I have several volumes of Bone Sutras, and they've really championed my work. So I'm so glad, Paul and Larry. If people look at the acknowledgements, you'll see a huge chunk of poems that appeared in Paul's magazine, The Bitter Oleander, and Larry's magazine, Caliban and Caliban Online. So thank you, all four of you, for being here today. It means the world to me, dear friends. So I mentioned the Bone Sutras. I'm just going to read them because I hope they accrete. They tell a kind of surrealist narrative of a speaker who very, very much resembles me, who believes he has lived many lives and inhabits many spaces simultaneously and sequentially. The book, I looked today to see when did I write my first Bone Sutra. And I found an old journal and it was January of 2004. So I've been at this series for apparently 18 years. It began, I was echoing the opening to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, where he says, now we come to the study of yoga. That's a sutra. And so I wrote a line, now we come to the study of bones. And from there, these poems just kind of took off over the last 18 years. I've written other things, of course, but so this is the volume that deals mostly with marsupial consciousness, I hope in some way. It's dedicated to Benjamin. This is a drawing of Benjamin. Benjamin was actually a she. She's the last known marsupial wolf. And Tasmania, Borneo, Australia, they were called thylacines, and they inhabited that space. And she was in a zoo and was not well cared for. And she was the last known marsupial wolf. They're now extinct. Sometimes they're called the Tasmanian tiger because they can resemble a cat as well. So I'll just read these poems in sequence without much commentary at all. Starlight in the Deaf Man's Ear. I lay among the camels bathing in the soft blue starlight of another dawn. Not another dawn, but the Mongolian rain in my belly. It was like the story of pulling the golden lotus woman's corpse from the angry river. We will place a good, strong stone in our mouth and pretend the crimson hue. So many lives I've lived, like being the younger brother of Ruben Dario, Nicaraguan bloodletting from my pharmaceutical cup, or when someone named Simone made sounds into my mouth as she guided my hand across her voluptuous thigh, teaching me the words belly blur and please. And that time I only lived 3 days, 13 hours, 4 minutes, 37 seconds, refusing suck at the unwed breast of a Malaccan dawn. Dear Book of Precision, dear book of how to win a Mongolian pony race, tell me, how many times have I taken to the steppes, fearing the Tartars in the barbaric encampment of my soul? Tell me which lives I've led, with dignity or blame. That time I awoke not as a baby, but as epinastic enzymes in the afterbirth of a camel foal. There are herds that pass through me as I write, as I sip the hot morning hush, yonking and spitting the dawn down from dark to a deep, dampening blue. And you can hear me okay? Volume's good? Okay. This is called Water Museum. I had a vision one night. Well, what if we had a museum that was just dedicated to water? Water Museum. The Water Museum opened yesterday. All those crystalline forays from here to there. There was a stopwatch with Argentinian sun glint from the time of Magellan. There was a compass from a Japanese schooner that refused to point north. A Chinese junk kept lugging young women from Bangkok into white slavery. Penguin skins beached on Java as if even primordial love wasn't enough. Conquistadors camped by the fountain of Peruvian bloodbaths. Dip your finger here and cross yourself 3 times to ward off the teeth of a moray eel. Do you want to learn a prayer? Try absorbing the banana splash of waves in Fiji, refusing the constabulary and its men. The Water Museum closed today, as if Antony had never wed Cleopatra, had never drunk horse urine along the Nile to demonstrate his strength. Blackened, disparate, hopeless nautical lines of bacteria invaded the Cape of Good Hope, dispersed as blackwater fever, elephantiasis, a malarial shivering for more. Look, there are the throat gullies of the trumpet swan, and there, the parasites without which the swan would die. King me. You remember that phrase when we were kids and played checkers. King me. We are composed primarily of one another's echoes of pain. Witness the copperhead coiling into itself as if reflecting the moon's worm. Once again, the passing herds make an unbearable rain. I knew my weather and was certain of yours, but could not recognize your transfiguration of salt. You brought me the book. It contained nothing but verbs, the language families of trees. Some letters were chewed by bookworms, though we knew them as eels. so past and present intermixed. Sometimes I find you in your sleep when I least respect it. We leave the body, float through the silk of one another's thorax, and play a game of checkers on the back of a hippopotamus. Then it's time to bathe, and she descends her powerful back into the slosh of the Zambezi. How long will we hold on as she takes us through the flavorful reeds? You love the cool, but lament the loss of the checkers, you tell me, as they float downstream near the crocodile's thrash. A simple game of life and death, you say, and of getting kinged. Bathtub oils and historical bones. Two exhausted hemispheres. Summer train the night. I hear the hyena cowl, crawl the high dirt, and realize I've been alone 65 years. I turn to Hernandez. I pause for pause. I annul the piano dirge of Nicanor Parra's hernia. I realize the inguinal zone of livid camel water trusts the hazy oasis plum. I extract my ear and hand it back to Van Gogh's accountant. The largest obsession of selfish concentration was a mathematical fulfillment. I realize I've never been alone among the long rows and tables, and not even among the probabilities of strict animal milk. I might be buried in bathtub oils of historical bones. I might try them on one by one and dream Aesop's horse. I cannot see the spare change in your weeping. You spend yourself and tell me a fricative seems like a pleasant enough gasp. And so I turn to Desnos and invoke the sleep medicines. I crawl my Breton, even my Demal, into the speckled skin at the lip of my midnight cup of cinnamon and boiled milk. And here's the title poem, Marsupial Mouth Movements. And inner was the world the way a people talk fast. Hand me a mask, and requisite the sleep I set out in search of the pouch. The inner lives of owls consist of certain parasites designed to thrive. If the Tasmanian tapeworm goes extinct, where does that leave our hands as we grasp a photo of the long gone thylacine? Little marsupial wolf hunted to extinct. Burn these long ears of regret. Once you're struck into flesh, you find it difficult to hear anything that sounds remotely human. I was suddenly grown up, wearing a crew neck, convincing myself it was a cardigan. I needed a way out of even the toughest sentence, so I ever after anew speak. And inner was that world, the bled, the people, the talk. So private was my eye. The pineal gland was soggy with remembrance. Little beautiful birth sores full of clarified milk and long journeys of the fur. Rasa, which is in the Sanskrit tradition, it means flavor, wonderful aesthetic flavor. Renee Damal actually has a beautiful book called Rasa. R-A-S-A. Were my boy Crease aware of the dictionary of birds, then we might intersect one another's sleep apnea as if it were a scent. For far too long now, I have been mounted on the wall, stuffed in the mouth with particles of Brahms. He kept birds in his baton to make the oboe flutter. Before each concert, he'd distribute to the orchestra a jacket of sea salt asking no one to wear it so as to release the rhythmic wing beats of the birds. There is a sinking in my chest whenever the new weather. I realize it is just the bend of a heavily dozing sunflower, but still I shuffle through conjugations of the phrase, the weighty slur of my birth. The dictionary of burrs rides me from below. I am often saddle sore just in touching the etymology of my own signature. I looked at the wall until I saw a nail nailed into a nail. If you can, hand me the stillness of a peacock flying through its own death. Tell me, if you must, where I might find the full flavor of sitar music, of a Tagore poem in Bengali, of a peacock's unfulfilled cry at dusk. In which page of the book of large words does it lie? And where did I go wrong? And then two more, ever broken. Delicate letters in the hide of an ass. Delicate math your mouth modulates into mine. Divert me to the static of your understanding. Let me form a parrot from these gloves and dust. Mimic cage strange mouth movements of almost music. Repeat after me. Nothing is worth repeating. I'm not talking river risk, but the border of a bygone shoulder slope of hope. You say, stand at the wall and let the leeches profit from what you should have said. You say, gentlemen, aim low, please, and forgive his groinal moan. Blindfold me, forego the smoke, and yes, keep reading me the urine inscriptions of Vallejo, even as I stink. I have been a cartridge echo a long time, afraid of rifles, slaughterhouses, false teeth, and the one true word I should have said just once on one occasion in the opening suture of the first page of the first book ever broken. And this closing poem for this evening is a term from Karl Marx, The Methods of Production. And again, Glow, I really want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart bringing this book out. It means the world to me. And I want to thank you and Bill, and of course, all of you for being here, and especially the four friends who made a point of being here this evening. The methods of production. A long, transparent maneuver flattens the weight of woven rain, or a maneuvered transport weaves flat, heavy storms. Now I come to translating myself. Steep a pot of oolong tea. I am excruciating myself in your spleen. A man or a woman in general could be a rich history, a soiled linguistic itch, especially if we speak of controlling the methods of production. We must tax the wedding bed, or the kitchen chair she straddles you on, or the psalm set of her breast. Wrap your legs around my hips as if the tightening mattered. Say, you're staying over and again into my mouth so that I might release the owl's midnight resin. We belly touch the whalebone washed up between us into a vast sestina. I have been repeating 7, not 6 words my entire life, one for each chakra. It does matter. All of it matters. Om beloved, om beloved, om beloved. own. Thank you so much. It was so much fun to read and see everyone. And I'm looking forward to the other readers.
Thank you, George. That was wonderful. The nice thing about tonight is, you know, with working on the books and getting them out there is I could hear the poems come to life. So thank you. And our next reader is David O'Connell. And this is his book, Our Best Defense. And David's chapbook, A Better Way to Fall, was awarded the Philbrick Poetry Award. His poetry has appeared in New Ohio Review, the Cincinnati Review, Poet Lore, Copper Nickel, and North American Review, among many other journals. He has received fellowships in poetry from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts and earned his MFA at Ohio State University. He lives in Providence, Rhode Island, with his wife, the poet Julie Danho, and their daughter. And you can visit his website for more information, and it's davidoconnellpoet.com. And I give you David.
Thank you so much, Gloria. This is really fantastic, and it's so great to read with you, George and Michael. It's just really wonderful to have this opportunity, and I really appreciate all the people that came out. To have two sisters-in-law, as I said, and my mother-in-law is here, and friends, and especially to have Bob Cording here, who taught me my first poetry class, my first writing class when I was in college, has been a mentor throughout my life, and wrote a wonderful blurb that's on the back of the book. So considering that today is Earth Day, I just wanted to start. There's a couple of poems that I thought would be suitable for this occasion in the book, and wanted to start with one called Thaw. And it just sort of starts with one of those days in early spring, late winter, where we have that unseasonable weather of the 70s and the 80s. And sort of the way in which we react to it oftentimes is to sort of laugh and say like, oh, global warming, like, you know, it's working out for us a little bit. So this is called Thaw. Mid-March, noon, the sunlight presses warm against the city like a hand. The TV says it's record-breaking, says it's toppled 47, and this streak may last the week. Ties loosed, blouses cut low and blooming color. The lunch hour crowds rejoice. Music blasts in snippets. Skaters rocket from the steps of the museum where office workers picnic and the statuary fairly glows. Today, winter is a dread forgotten. And more than once, stepping from the bus, waiting at the corner for the light, I've heard a total stranger say, global warming, to no one in particular, with a shrug and grin that means at least today, destruction's on our side, which means we might as well enjoy the fall. I think on days like this, beautiful days, we believe the earth suffers the way we know a child suffers halfway round the world from drought. The TV tells us so, which means we believe it, the way we know we become dirt, or somehow even less than that. The sort of the preamble, I think I showed the cover of the book a couple of times. This is actually a picture of a sarcophagus, like a little snippet of a sarcophagus that is in the RISD Museum in Providence, Rhode Island. And they were kind enough to let me use the image. And I was actually with my daughter, who was, I guess, maybe like 5 at the time, and they had a drawing class, and we were in this antiquities room, and I saw this sarcophagus and was really startled by the placard that was on it that said, this is one of the few sarcophagi bearing scenes of the Trojan War. And it just made me kind of think about empire, not only Troy, but this was a Roman sarcophagus, and now it's in America. And the way in which sort of empires rise and empires fall. And so it's the reason why I wanted the picture for the book. And the poem itself takes its title from that placard. It says, "This is one of the few sarcophagi bearing scenes of the Trojan War. RISD Museum, Providence, Rhode Island." On one side, a two-part story. Achilles clashing with Hector, then Hector being dragged by Achilles around and around the walls of Troy. Almost 2,000 years on, and in the battle scene at least, it's Hector who fares better. True, he's lost one good arm and 4 of his washboard abs. But that demigod Achilles carries on without his hands, or more disturbingly, a neck. Marble pale, he looks more poltergeist than hero. Skull and helmet floating an inch above his shoulders, hour after hour in the hush of this small gallery in a country unimagined by those who quarried the rock, or by the sculptor who worked it, or by the wealthy family, anonymous, who commissioned this sarcophagus. Back in a time, they say, that a citizen could walk the world unharmed. Such was the power of Rome. The next poem is also sort of a weather poem, and it really is a conceit of spring in some ways being like a revolution, and sort of carrying that conceit all the way to its end. I'm someone who every spring revels in that first warm weather, but absolutely despises the heat and humidity. I'm extremely pale. The sun just destroys me. And so in some ways it started with the idea of spring being a revolution, and then thinking about the way in which actual revolutions end up in some ways turning to despots and falling apart so often. Spring in the suburbs. Spring in the suburbs is a revolution long in the planning. Crocuses rising up despite the night's last frost, their conviction inflaming the wide lawns green with reckless youth. Now, everywhere, we see the zip-gunned hummingbirds returning, the red splash of cardinals, the flash mobs of sparrows amidst winter's last gasp, a freak snowfall that melts by noon. These are the days of parades, all of us spilling out of doors, blinking in this dazzle with the same fervor that unfurls leaf buds' billion flags as the old order topples. How certain we are there has never been a breeze like this, or this scent mornings of the whole world truly new. And of the months to come, the flower wilt and animal pant and retreating indoors, and of the sun's brutality that will make us long for the icicle, how it caught the light outside the picture window. It was beautiful, peaceful, no? No, none of that matters now. Kind of keeping with that same theme, one of the things I miss, of course, most in COVID, as so many of us do, is traveling a little bit. And my wife and I used to go to New York, maybe a couple times a year. And this poem was actually written at a time when we were in New York, which is what reminded me of it today. History will remember. And the only thing you might need to know also is that the Perseid meteor shower is one of those meteor showers that occurs annually, because there was a time, quite a long time ago, where the meteor passed and it just leaves what now we see as a comet passed, and now it leaves its detritus that's turning into meteors. History will remember, maybe not today, but this July, surely, the way the city wakes up to brunch, the cafe windows thrown open to foot traffic, It rained overnight, but now sun. Or if not this July, certainly the skyline, the bar graph of Midtown, the Empire State Building, the Chrysler, all that was accomplished. And that we were, not we as in you and me, but we all. Impossible that the record could be garbled beyond translation. Centuries on, careers will be made retelling what's sorry. A cabbie's honking at a bike messenger, and the newsstand on the corners glossy with everything you'd ever need to know about red carpet nip slips, double truffle burgers, how soon the West Antarctic ice sheet's likely to collapse. I've got weekend plans. My wife's friends rented a place in the Hamptons we could never afford. She doesn't buy, she says, because it'll be underwater in a decade. I'm hoping, like last year, for clear nights. We're crossing through the Perseids, that annual shower of meteors, traces of a comet's tail that flared some time ago. Also kind of maybe thinking of that travel theme. This poem was in some ways inspired by some of the frescoes that I had seen once when we were traveling in Italy, and how angels in those frescoes always seem to sort of hover over oftentimes grisly scenes or someone dying, and they can't seem to do anything about it. They just bear witness. And it reminded me how that's in some ways true when we see deaths in movies. It's called In the Movies, One Rarely Dies Alone. In the movies, one rarely dies alone. Usually someone is scripted in, giving the dying a reason to speak, so we might be moved by the improbable last words, delivered raspingly, or between blood coughs, causing considerable squinching up of eyes. And even when someone dies alone, he or she is not alone. We know that every death is attended to by a union crew, and it's a work day where even the dead are on the clock. True, we may forget more easily if the one dying is particularly deft at suffering, having died many deaths, but also somewhere we remember that there is a reality behind this reality on screen, even as we grieve in the refrigerated dark amongst the gathered strangers, shoulder to shoulder in comfortable rows, all of us there with the dying, the way in some frescoes, the angels bear witness, forbidden to intervene. I have just one last poem. I just want to, again, Gloria, thank you so much for this reading and for the book and all the work that the press put into it. This really is something that I've been working towards for many, many years. And I'm so happy, Bob, that you're here, because this last poem, The Carn, there were notes that he gave me in this poem. I think this is the last poem that I wrote. It's the last poem in the book, and it's the last, I think, that I wrote before sending off the manuscript. And Bob had some very insightful comments, I remember, on this one. The Carn, Diana's Bath, Bartlett, New Hampshire. And just to let you know, in the White Mountains, if you've ever been, there is this beautiful river area that the tourists go to that used to have a mill that's sort of fallen down. And the tourists now, you just see hundreds and hundreds of little stacked rocks, little cairns built up all along the river. And again, it has the theme a little bit of sort of what remains and what lasts. The Carn, Diana's Baths, Bartlett, New Hampshire. In late April, the snow melt runs so fiercely, sometimes even boulders are muscled forward by a current still sculpting these waterfalls and shallow pools that have pulled the tourists in since the 1860s when a Mr. Lucy ran his mill. But we arrive in August, the end of our vacation, to find the rapids sleepy as a depot in a Western once the train has gone. It's nearly evening, and the waiting mountains wrap pastel clouds about themselves like shawls. Their summit's chill seems nearer here, where slim birch and ash trees white knuckle the steep bank, their leaves skittish at the slightest summer breeze. I imagine it's the water that unnerves them, whispering its aftermath of ice and snow returning. It numbs our skin as we wade knee-deep, hunting the palm-sized stones ironed flat over centuries that one by one we stack and balance on a midstream boulder, its surface warm as bread from the oven. 20 minutes, and our small cairn takes shape among the hundreds, a tradition it seems of tourists that dot the shelves and tables of granite exposed by low water moving past the remnants of Lucy's water wheel. It's concrete, still claiming, however weakly, he was here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. That was wonderful. And our next reader is Michael Todd Steffen, and his book is On Earth as It Is. This is it. And Michael is the author of Partner, Orchard, Day, Moon, and that was published in 2014 by Cervena Barva Press. I can't believe it's been that long. He also is the recipient of a 2021 Massachusetts Cultural Council Literary Fellowship, and his poetry has appeared in journals including the Boston Globe, Ibbotson Street, the Lyric, and Synchronized Chaos. Michael lives here in Somerville, Massachusetts, and I give you Michael.
Well, thanks, Gloria. Thanks so much for having us. It was great to hear George and David read wonderful poems. And well, Gloria showed the book On Earth as It Is, their Earth poems. And when I was talking to Gloria, when this came out at the end of February, early March, I asked if we could have the reading on Earth Day today, March 20 or April 22nd. So a happy and mindful Earth Day to everybody. And it's great to see my parents and my niece Molly with her kids there and everybody else. Thanks for showing up. Tonight, I'm going to read just one poem from my first book, Partner, Orchard, Day, Moon. The poem is dated the 20th of June, 2008. It is the day that the square down from the Grolier bookshop was dedicated to Louisa Solano. It's a dedication and an in-memory poem. There comes a time to preserve a place from its neglect in the abandon of anonymity of progress circles as they go on to live by criticism who didn't bother so much over themselves as others. Now the occasion says this: with our brevity in shy honor to bear our levity, though you have mattered these years around the square, and Cambridge means to keep you with your name there. On Earth as It Is, the book, it takes its title, I guess, because my focus had been pretty much Earth poems before the pandemic started, when I first brought the book to Gloria. And I will read from them. You'll realize that they are poems about the earth. The first actually has a reference to Sigmund Freud, who gave us the id, the ego, and the superego. And I just had felt he left something out, so I wrote the super id. The sea, ever wagged by its tail, its all continuum seals playing out into their horror of an orca's play, with little mind for manners, appearance, plasticity, the business of the sails of clouds stacked like the coast's glass mountains. These Aeolian beings drawing from it fertile rain, shimmering nets, and devastating storms. Great unself-consciousness swims between one's hunger and another's, from deep memory clear to the shallows of our shellfish and our muck, threatening its copious data of marvels and unmasking me, boy wizard on the shore of the ponderous metaphor. This poem is for one of the founders of the Earth movement and one of our heroes, Rachel Carson. Poem for Rachel Carson. Jot question marks next to Adam and the garden grown eerily other. Doodle a frown face by the passage, all about Prometheus and his beneficial then rampant fire. Even Linda Lear's magnificent biography leaves the thief in me, wanting data from the isles of your sirens. You could no more confuse yourself with the subject of your life writing than a starling with a starfish. What species largely mimetic would not overwhelm the instances of its genius among easily taken human society, stemmed in the planet's nature, in its inalienable difference, vulnerable to our want and oversight, we the seers no less having to lie in the bed we make, in this semi-conscious abundance amid seas, spring, life, needing of all things, a writer's style to bring it to life in our wonder. There was a small but beautiful exhibit by Sandra Botticelli at the MFA 5-6 years ago or so. And the central piece of this exhibit, Donna con Libro, became the subject of this poem, Lady with the Book. Listen, it's a painting. Her unworldly eyes, they look as though they've been in the fine print of this book since it was written. The painter seeing our infant Lord is hardly the word in the beginning, rather unlordly in his dismay. Although it's not uncommon even today for mothers and their children to fall in with a book. The theme's already lasting in the sense that it transcends the time of Botticelli. Surely he sat reading with his mother in her lap, whose warmth nestled his body. In the minds, the reach between us, though. Her fingers keep turning the pages. Look, look there, she says. See. April is also baseball season, and here is a baseball poem for the month of April. I'm sure glad they settled the dispute. The poem is titled "Take Me Out," he thought. Take me out, he thought, to the ballpark. The one day of a summer's week the poet at Wrigley took for himself grew clean as the snap of leather, stitched ball into the mitt. If it wasn't for our pitching, fielding, hitting, and base running, we'd be looking pretty good. The poet lamented to a crack of pine and the crowd's watching the hit arc far foul under the bright sun, the green field and its trajectories oddly determined and surreal, the lightning of no two pitches striking the same, keeping ump and scorekeeper vigilant with the infielders on the balls of their feet. A good 3/4 of every hour, glove on knee, bat on shoulder, kicking around for the next pitch. And what could be more interesting than watching a baseball game? My own body became a sort of metonymy or fragment, like the earth, as I was putting the poems together, and certainly its sensations, one I associate with pain. I have recently been to see this person. It is the dentist, everybody's best friend. The dentist, with his little extended circle of a mirror, reached into your darkness, with his fine, sharp metal hook, mining for resistance and decay, as if the X-ray hadn't shown him. Who puts their fingers in your mouth? A layer of us wonders, reclined in his uneasy chair. His concentration is that of a chess player to situate, remove, drill, crown. Under the angelic vanity, my jaw spiked with reminders of the original skull, our dust, whose agony won't outlast, though bites down to measure now, ow. Invention of the moment and its isolating pain in the more plausible rib of Adam God removed, like a lisp of self-cultivated shrapnel, that we be recognizable among peers with enough missing from our smile. And my last poem about the great giants of the Pacific Northwest. The poem is called For the Sequoias, the Redwoods. For the sequoias, whose ancestors John Muir sought far and wide, finding none, bottom and topmost turtle. Wondering or failing to wonder at them because we cannot measure up, it's easy to speak against these high embodiments of years, takers of our youth and loves. They number us, each deepening through brief splendors of autumn to the long attenuation of our depth and cover, to a nudity who will fumble with. Sky-bound, street-wide-stepped 30 couples waltzed on the diameter floor of the first one filled by a gold rusher. As much they tell us, we shade ourselves beyond the sunken tooth in the fruit. The promise is born of our ongoing need to witness these things being remembered, time's tale in time's mouth, otherwise as soon erased and lost. The rain and the shaken leaves, the swifts in front of the storm, the hawk in the silence after. Thanks, everyone, so much for coming in and listening.
Thank you, Michael. That was great. All of you tonight were just wonderful. And so can we all give them a round of applause one more time? Thank you so much.